God made Paul a stumbling block for every system that tries to reshape the Christian faith. Paul proclaimed Jesus as divine, a stumbling block for Jehovah's Witnesses because they teach that Jesus is a created being. Paul preached Christ crucified and risen, a stumbling block for Islam because Islam denies that Jesus truly died on the cross. Paul lived a life of suffering, beatings, imprisonment, weakness, and eventually death, a stumbling block for prosperity theology because his life destroys the idea that faith guarantees comfort, health, wealth, and earthly success. Paul was once an enemy of the church before he became an apostle, a stumbling block for atheists and skeptics because his conversion demands an explanation. Paul claimed the risen Jesus appeared to him, a stumbling block for anyone who reduces Christianity to myth, because Paul says his faith was rooted in an encounter with the living Christ. Paul preached that Gentiles are fully included in salvation through Christ, a stumbling block for black Hebrew Israelites, because Paul says the promise is not limited to one ethnicity. Paul connected Old Testament and New Testament together, a stumbling block for anyone who says Paul invented a new religion, because Paul argued that Christ fulfilled what the scriptures already pointed to. Paul was received by the other apostles, a stumbling block for Jesus' words only arguments, because rejecting Paul means explaining why the early church accepted him. Paul preached salvation by grace through faith, apart from works of the law, a stumbling block for legalism, because he leaves no room for boasting and rule-keeping, rituals, or bloodlines. Paul made the resurrection central to the gospel, a stumbling block for liberal Christianity, because Paul does not allow Jesus to be reduced to a moral teacher or inspirational figure. And this is what makes it ironic. Paul asks God to remove the thorn from his flesh, and Jesus said, "My grace is sufficient for you." But today, Paul himself has become a thorn in the side of every religion, doctrine, and system that tries to compromise Christianity. His life, his letters, his suffering, his conversion, his theology, and his witness to the risen Christ stand in the way. You cannot escape him. You cannot ignore him. You cannot remove him without tearing apart the witnesses of the early church. The thorn in Paul's side became a thorn in humanity's side, a painful reminder that Jesus lived, died, and rose again, and appeared to those he chose. And even that thorn is the love of God, reminding the world of the truth it keeps trying to avoid.